Hello everyone. My name is Claire Najjuuko. I am a graduate research assistant at NetLabs UG, and I've just completed my bachelor's degree in telecommunications engineering from Makerere University. So I'll just share my screen. Just a minute. I am presenting a paper titled A Survey of 5G for Rural Broadband Connectivity. My name once again is Claire Najjuuko from NetLabs UG, Makerere University in Uganda. This paper stems from a project which aims at piloting a model for rural broadband connectivity, which focuses on agriculture, education, and health. The key issues being addressed in the project are to assess the key priority intervention pathways for deploying rural broadband connectivity, and to assess the business models for affordable rural broadband through the use of smart and next generation technologies, including 5G. So it is important to note that there are at least 2 billion people in the world today living in rural remote areas, which are either underserved or unserved by mobile telecommunications operators. Due to their low population density, the difficult terrain in rural areas, or the extremely low GDP in some of these areas, which would negatively impact on the cost for mobile operators. So as a result, these people do not get to enjoy the benefits that come along with mobile digital connectivity or digital services. This brings us to the main objective of this research, which is to assess the potential of using 5G networks for rural broadband connectivity and the challenges that must be overcome. In order to achieve the main objective, we highlighted the importance of digital connectivity in rural areas to national development. We looked into the 5G areas of applicability in rural-based settings. We identified the challenges surrounding 5G network deployment in these remote and rural areas. And finally, we made proposals that can be taken up by stakeholders to achieve 5G-based digital connectivity in rural areas. This research involved the analysis of published documents relevant to the topic of 5G deployment for rural broadband connectivity. In particular, we're interested in the relevance of rural broadband access as well as its applications in agriculture, health, and education, as well as the challenges associated with 5G network implementation in rural areas. We relied heavily on high-quality online journals for this study. We also listed some conference proceedings indexed by reputable online databases. In addition, we use trusted online organization documents and websites for information related to the rural scenario. Since we wanted to actually look at the current use cases that are utilizing 5G technology, the majority of this information about the use of 5G in rural and remote areas is accessible on organizational websites rather than online journals, which is why we use the organizational websites. So, why is 5G connectivity, or why is digital connectivity important for a rural or a remote area? Studies have shown that digital connectivity is a key driver of economic growth. In addition, the use of ICT by individuals or by businesses or governments is positively associated with individual and economic growth. In addition, increasing productivity of any nation is associated with a physically well-developed digital infrastructure, which is represented by ICT accessibility. Therefore, in order for a country to reach its full economic potential, its rural and remote areas must be considered and fully supported in terms of digital infrastructure, not forgetting the COVID-19 pandemic, which has further showed the urgent need to provide high-speed internet access to rural areas to allow for remote education, remote working, and remote healthcare, among other things. With 5G, rural consumers will not only be able to access internet at broadband speeds, but will also aid in the creation of an intelligent countryside. So what is this 5G technology that we're talking about? It is the latest communications technology that is combining cloud infrastructure, a virtualized network core, intelligent edge services, and a distributed computing model that derives insight from the data generated by billions of devices. The technology will include fast and intelligent networks, back-end services, extremely low latency, and connected devices. So since the 5G comes with advanced and innovative services and applications which are driving requirements for very high peak data rates and increased throughput, It has thus fueled the need for more radio frequency bandwidth. So the spectrum relevant for 5G wireless access therefore ranges between 1 gigahertz to 100 gigahertz. It is important to note that rolling out 5G in the higher bands, however, especially those above 6 gigahertz, will only largely satisfy needs in urban or suburban areas for improved capacity. The spectrum needed to meet the needs of remote areas for coverage should be the sub-6 band. The sub-6 band is the spectrum below 6 gigahertz, and it is to be used to ensure wide area coverage in 5G, which is a key factor for rural areas since they are usually sparsely populated. So we went ahead to investigate some of the use cases of 5G broadband in rural and low-income areas. Remember, the advanced digital latency 5G network will bring together a system that connects billions of devices and sensors, enabling advances in healthcare, in education, in resource management, in transportation, in agriculture, and in many other sectors. So we set out to investigate some of the current applications in rural areas that are being supported by reliable digital connectivity. We looked in particular at agriculture, at health, and at education. So there are certain digital platforms that have been created for smallholder farmers and for large farmers to use on their farms. These applications are providing agronomic information and advice to smallholder farmers and helping them to make informed decisions to reduce their costs and to increase their yields and get better price for their output. They include climate farmers and field view. In addition, remote sensors are being planted in farms to optimize the irrigation process, to tell farmers when it is best to irrigate, how much should be irrigated. IoT-enabled remote sensors are also being used to intelligently advise farmers on how susceptible, for example, their crops are to diseases and pests. To forecast an AI-based application is being used in India to forecast sowing dates, to forecast dates for applying fertilizers, how much fertilizer should be applied, to forecast when to spray pesticide, and so on and so forth. In the healthcare sector, it is access to digital records supporting patients and services has become essential. In cases where access to digital connectivity is poor, the ability to provide effective healthcare at key locations and in communities is materially impeded. In addition, the healthcare need is driven partly by the aging nature of populations found in rural areas. Some of these people cannot actually move to hospitals. So we looked at some of the examples in more developed countries where they're using the 5G technology to deliver healthcare services at a distance. For example, in 2020, a hospital in Birmingham delivered specialist consultations at a distance, complete with digital stethoscopes, remote ultrasound scans, and even cardiograms. This was in response to the COVID-19 social distancing requirements. But this can go on, like this can be adopted by even the rural scenario, whereby doctors can probably not move to the patient, or the patient cannot move to the hospital. In addition, in 2019, a smart ambulance was created using the 5G technology. In this ambulance, Samsung, together with O2, a mobile operator in the United Kingdom, managed to produce a trial which reproduced an emergency call out, allowing paramedics to perform checks, to gather data, and communicate with consultants remotely using onboard equipment. Not forgetting that these low latency 5G networks will also allow for education activities to be facilitated efficiently through real-time online classes, especially in the current circumstances where physical access to schools is limited. 5G can also help students to do school homework at home and cover the so-called homework gap faced by students in rural and low-income areas. So, if 5G is so good, what is impeding? Which challenges are being faced by this 5G technology in rural areas? So the deployment of 5G in rural areas is hindered by the odd features of the scenario, as you can see presented in this table, which shows the comparison of 5G scenarios in urban, rural, and low-income areas. So unlike 5G's urban high definition streaming, tactile internet, and the Internet of Things, many rural and low-income areas still lack these basic digital services. These areas are disconnected from the rest of the world, and the lack of internet coverage is the most crucial problem that has to be dealt with. In urban regions, maximizing bandwidth may be crucial. On the other hand, in rural regions, in rural areas, it is important to guarantee a given minimum amount of bandwidth to users. In addition, rural and low-income areas require a guarantee of basic coverage rather than high bandwidth services. Furthermore, remember, in some of these rural and low-income areas, the power grid may be unavailable or unreliable. Therefore, renewable energy sources, for example, solar and wind energies, are important to consider. Not forgetting that subscription fees for low-income areas will be made as low as possible, or should be made as low as possible, keeping in mind that in low-income regions, people should pay much less for internet connection compared to people living in the urban region. This inevitably must influence the associated business models, which cannot be based on the classical return on investment, but rather on the fact that the internet is a primary need. According to the Basic Internet Foundation, the lack of willingness to pay by users in developing countries has become a major challenge for telecom operators. Another problem is the operator in rural areas will have to deal with electricity scarcity, as well as wisely manage the network resources to ensure coverage. Finally, the difference in user mobility is another aspect that has to be considered. Particularly, rural and low-income areas are characterized by relatively lower mobility compared to urban areas. This feature has also has an influence on the design in these areas. So, we made some sustainability approaches recommendations which can be used in order to be able to use this 5G technology in the rural scenario. New architectures, for example, researchers have suggested that sustainable 5G architecture using 4 main pillars, which are essential to the design, which include the services and networks should be managed in a converged way. Secondly, the possibility to completely virtualize most of the network components should be exploited and managed by a central entity. Thirdly, the network components should be softwareized and a general purpose hardware can be adopted for all the devices. And lastly, since the power grid is assumed not to be so present or reliable in rural or income areas, large exploitation of renewable energies to power the devices should be used. So these 4 pillars can be combined to develop a comprehensive low-cost connectivity architecture that can efficiently support a wide range of services and applications in rural areas. The next approach is new business models, where new entrants in the telecommunications sector should concentrate on providing 5 gigahertz should concentrate on being 5 gigahertz wireless internet service providers. The third approach are new funding models. So we suggest a new approach to funding to match the newly emerging commercial models. The 2 key aspects are who pays and who pays back. Part of the solution is to identify the right investor, and the other part is to manage the risk to the point that the risk-adjusted return becomes sufficiently compelling to trigger investment. And the final part of the solution is to capture the non-financial objectives of the investment. For instance, government grants and private equity investors, these are possibilities. The return requirements of the funder must be considered, whether they are social and industry objectives, for example, for government grants, or if they are pure financial returns, for example, for private equity investors. In conclusion, just a summary, we have discussed 5G network technology, which is set to revolutionize the world and transform economies and spark growth. Much as its deployment in rural areas is still not a given. The discussion in this paper centered on the use cases of 5G broadband connectivity in rural areas with emphasis on developing countries. Challenges facing mass adoption and possible solutions have also been discussed. We have advised that supportive government policy interventions are crucial towards realizing adoption of 5G for rural broadband connectivity. Thank you so much for listening to me. This is the end of the presentation.